The buzz of insects hummed thick in the air. The reek of perspiration and straw hung heavy in the swelter. And there she stood, a young lady, barely past 21, lashed to a splintered timber beam in a crumbling barn on the outskirts of Laredo, New Mexico. Her hands were knotted so fiercely the cord dug into her flesh, fresh wounds seeping under the blazing rays. One lid puffed closed, her jaw flushed from a strike that still stung. Her pale gown ripped at the collar and the thigh. She had been roughed up, abandoned there like a beast. The New Mexico heat of 1885 showed no mercy. Grit danced through the cracked boards of the barn, dusting her shredded frock, clinging to the damp on her battered hide. She shook, not only from hurt, but from dread, that twisted sort of dread that weighs down your ribs. She had resisted, you could tell from the cord scars on her limbs, from the way her shins were grazed bloody from kicking to rise. But now she dangled slack, her breaths faint, her gaze fixed on the entrance like she was begging for somebody, anybody to show. Folks of the frontier knew brutality. They had witnessed hangings, stock thieves, ruthless shootouts in taverns. But this was another matter. This was the image of the pure-hearted trampled by avarice and might. It was a scene that would pierce any soul, especially one who had fathered a girl or cherished a partner. The query echoed in the hush. Who could commit this, and for what reason? It was into this hush that Jacob Harlan strode, a cattleman of 48 summers, bearing the burden of an existence toughened by grief and isolation. He was no novice to suffering, but the view within that barn halted him cold. The light appeared to fade, the globe seemed to shrink to one vision. Alas, shattered, yet clinging to life. Her gaze damp with unshed drops. But freeing those cords was merely the start. The true peril lurked back at his spread. Jacob acted as any fellow with a pulse might. He drew his blade, severed the bindings, and steadied Eliza before she collapsed into the soil. Her frame was frail, quivering like a colt fresh from the womb, her hide feverish from the unyielding New Mexico blaze. He bore her from that barn, settled her gently over his mount, and rode for his homestead. With each stride of the hoofs, Jacob sensed the load of something graver than the girl in his grasp. He was deep in the thick of it, and he sensed it. By the hour they arrived at the spread, the heavens had shifted to the hue of smoldering embers. Jacob guided her into his modest shack, the aroma of pine smoke and hide enveloping them. He eased her onto a stool and drew a mug of liquid from the well beyond. She sipped like a soul parched for days, each swallow deliberate, her mouth quaking on the metal. Only then did words finally surface. She shared her name, Eliza Thorne. She shared she was the child of a herder up in Rio Mesa County. Her pa held acres that rolled vast and lush, acres that had snared the fancy of a fellow called Voss. Voss was a gent of fortune and fury, the type who figured coin claimed it all. Eliza's pa had declined him, and Voss, unused to that refusal, dispatched his crew to alter the reply. They had seized Eliza, lashed her, thrashed her, and dumped her to wither. She was not the prize. She was a bargaining chip, a piece in a grander scheme to shatter her pa's resolve and claim his turf. Jacob sat mute, absorbing it, his chin firm as granite. He had crossed paths with sorts like Voss his whole days, types who forged domains on terror, who bent the rules to suit need. But he also grasped this soil, this New Mexico earth, and he grasped when it merited holding firm. The notion of Eliza's pa bowed low, and Eliza dangled as lure churned his gut. Eliza's gaze locked with his over the shack's board. They were weary orbs, marked and puffy, but within burned a flicker. She had weathered agony no youth her years ought to know, yet she remained uncracked. Jacob felt the breeze turn by aiding her. He had waded into a tempest vaster than his own plot, and no simple retreat awaited. And as the lanterns dimmed in that shack, the crunch of steps beyond signaled Jacob that the gale was already at his threshold. The evening was still, too still for New Mexico. Jacob knew his grounds. He knew the yips of jackals, the moans of steers, the groan of the pump. But this noise was alien. Measured soles on ground, a figure beyond his door. His fingers drifted to the old revolver on the plank. The door groaned ajar, and in he loomed. Silas Kane, a brute with a sly smirk and stares that bore no regret. He was among Voss's Faru, the breed who skipped questions, just dealt blows and cinched loops. Eliza caught breath at the sight, her form tensing as if the cords had reclaimed her. Silas lounged in the frame, overly at ease for an intruder in another's den. He told Jacob he sought the lass. He stated it blunt, as if she were stock to corral anew. Jacob rose, his chin locked, the revolver firm in his hold. There hung a lull, the sort that brews like storm clouds gathering. Then Eliza shattered it. Her tone was hoarse yet fierce. She cried out, alerting Jacob just as Silas charged. That lone cry handed Jacob the advantage. The herder crashed Silas to the timber. Decades of toil in the pastures fueling brute force. Silas scrapped, but Jacob held him fast, and the brawl ebbed from him like moisture through cracked clay. When Jacob patted him down, a wad of notes tumbled free, crisp cash bearing the stamp of the Rio Mesa Bank, notes traced to Voss's ledgers. It was evidence, the sort no court need decipher. Eliza's complexion drained. She recalled one thug taunting as she was bound, boasting Voss would seize his desire. Now the fragments aligned. Jacob glared at Silas, the lout writhing like a viper pinned beneath a heel. The reality shone plain. Eliza had spoken true. She was merely a tool in a turf snatch that reeked of covet and hubris. Jacob sensed that ancient blaze in his core. He had endured many years, viewed souls crushed by dominance, but this varied. This was his spread, his soil, his haven, now linked to the destiny of this young soul. And if you're set to venture further into this whirlwind with us, tap that subscribe button now, so you catch the instant when Voss strides into view. Sunrise crept gradual, spilling glow over the New Mexico flats. Jacob had claimed no rest. He perched by the pane with his scattergun across his lap, scanning the seam where earth kissed firmament. Eliza slumbered in the stool near the hearth, her visage ashen, yet her will intact. The dark had offered no solace, just the ponderous fact that fresh strife loomed. Then it rang out, hoofbeats, not a lone pony, but a cluster, the rumble swelling like far-off peals. Jacob gained his feet and peered forth. 4 horsemen neared the spread, their forms swelling with each thump of their beasts. Each bore the arrogance born of dread they inspired. Eliza roused sharp when Jacob racked a shell. She breathed his name, her timbre taut. But talk proved needless. The pair grasped this juncture had dawned. Voss had loosed more hands, and they aimed to seal what Silas botched. The horsemen swung down amid a haze of powder, their heels grinding the parched loam. They gripped flares and tins of lamp oil, the gear that could doom a spread to cinders swift. One bellowed for Jacob to emerge and yield the girl. His pitch was no plea, it was a menace. Jacob advanced to the veranda, scattergun level, his outline stretched in the climbing dawn. He hollered reply,
his timbre deep but keen, declaring this bread was no prize for plunder. The deadlock dragged on, the sort of quiet that hammers your pulse in your skull. Then chaos erupted. A flare arced skyward, crashing into a stack of fodder. Eliza, heedless of peril, snatched a pail of fluid and doused the blaze. In that beat, Jacob pulled the stock. The lead rider toppled, his flare rattling earthward. The next surged ahead, iron out, but Jacob wheeled and blasted anew. The last dove for shelter, only to jolt as Eliza flung an oak slat at his pony, spooking the creature to buck and spill its load to the dust. The clash ended swift as it sparked. Powder lingered thick, the tang of powder acrid and tart. 3 lay struck.
1 slunk off to the scrub, cursing reprisal. Jacob loomed on the veranda, gasping deep, the scattergun yet heated in his clasp. Eliza regarded him, her bosom rising swift, her orbs broad, not in terror, but in a richer vein. And as the haze of shots clung, whispers of the scrap were already galloping to settlement, right to the soul who ignited it. By the moment Jacob hauled Silas Cain and the struck ones to town, rumors blazed like brush fire. Crowds milled in the lane, glances keen and mutters soft. When the lawman spied the sheaf of notes etched with Voss's vault-mark, and caught Silas curse his lord's title in rage, the final barrier of quiet splintered broad. Souls who had hushed for seasons now loosed their tongues. A trader advanced and recounted how Voss had drained him with crooked tallies. A bereft dame yelled how Voss's pack had chased her from her plot. The floodgate burst. By midday, the burg shed its chains of fright. They surged as one to Voss's grand manor on the rise. He sought to bar the gates, to cower after paid muscle, but dread crumbles thin when facts blaze free. Jacob lingered with Eliza at the throng's rim, beholding as the folk who once dipped chins now lifted proud. Voss was yanked down his own stairs, his silk vest shredded, his mug blanched. He bade for calm, for deference, but ears turned deaf. In the frontier, justice might swing a hammer now and then, but oftener it rose from the grips of plain souls who reached their limit. That morn, Voss forfeited all. His sway, his vanity, and the terror he wielded. Only post the grit cleared did Elias Thorne rumble in with his cart. His features etched profound with wakeful eaves, but his gaze sparked at Eliza's form. She dashed to his embrace, and the vision of sire and kin rejoined stirred even the sternest herder to dash away damp. Elias clasped Jacob's palm, squeezing firm, a voiceless nod twixt 2 who fathomed yielding. Then Eliza scaled the cart. She pivoted, her gaze dwelling on Jacob. They were gentle, brimming with more than thanks. Jacob doffed his brim with a subtle grin. He uttered zilch, but the quiet then weighed denser than speech. Was it farewell, or the dawn of a bond unspoken? And perhaps that's the moral woven here, that fairness springs not from riches but from valor. That affection does not forever thunder. At times it lingers in stillness. So, tell me true, if you stood in Jacob's boots, would you have voiced your soul ere that cart trundled off? If this yarn tugged at you, smash that like button. Drop a comment on what you'd do next, and subscribe for more, 'cause the frontier's full of whispers waiting to roar.